Have you ever tried to plot a fantasy novel and ended up with like a really cool magic system, side characters that you love, and absolutely no idea what happens in the middle? If that sounds like you, you're in the right place. If we haven't met yet, I'm Rita. I'm an aspiring fantasy author who's currently working on a novel that's loosely based on Mulan. I've got a degree in English literature, and I spent way too many years obsessing about story structure, so you don't have to. Today we're talking about beat sheets. So we're going to talk about what they are, how they're different from outlines, how Save the Cat fits in, and how I personally use a fantasy adapted beat sheet template to plot my novels without killing creativity. I also quickly wanted to mention that I have an entire blog post that talks about what a beat sheet is, so I'm going to be linking that blog in the description below. Without further ado, let us begin. First things first, what is a beat sheet? A beat sheet is a map of major turning points in your story. So it's not chapters, it's not scenes, it's not really moments either. They're points where something changes, where your plot moves forward. A decision is made, the stakes escalate, the story can't go back to how it was. Think about it as this. If scenes are like sentences and chapters are paragraphs, a beat sheet is the structural argument of the story. It tells you what must happen for the story to work. Now I want to quickly clarify what the difference is between a beat sheet and an outline, because this is something that confused me too. Unlike an outline, a beat sheet stays a little bit more zoomed out. So an outline says, in chapter 14, this character did this in this location. A beat sheet would say, this is where the protagonist commits to the journey, or this is where the cost becomes unavoidable. Outlines are essentially execution level, and beat sheets are more structural. They're especially useful before you lock yourself into scenes that might not actually serve the story later on. Now I want to discuss what you likely came here for in the first place, which is to understand what beats are part of a beat sheet and what's expected from each beat. So most modern beat sheets are based on Save the Cat, which includes 15 beats. Now, Save the Cat was originally crafted for screenwriting, but then it got adapted for novel writing as well. So here are all the beats that are included in a typical beat sheet. I'm also going to be using Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone as a familiar example so you can see how this actually works. So the first beat is the opening image. This is a snapshot of the protagonist's life before the story truly begins. So in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, this is where you see Harry living under the stairs in the cupboard with the Dursleys. He's being mistreated, he's powerless, and he's unaware of who he really is. Then comes the theme stated. So this is a hint at the core idea of the story, what the protagonist will need to learn or confront. In Harry Potter, these are early scenes that show us what Harry lacks, so love, belonging, and choice. It quietly sets up the values the story will reward later. Then there's the setup. This is where we're grounded in the world. We meet the key characters, learn the rules, and see the problem forming. So in Harry Potter, this is life with the Dursleys, strange magical incidents like when the glass disappears at the zoo, the letters arriving, and the sense that Harry doesn't really belong where he is. Then there's the catalyst, so the inciting incident. This is something that happens that disrupts the status quo and forces the story to move. In Harry Potter, obviously, this is when Hagrid arrives at the lighthouse and tells Harry, "You're a wizard, Harry." The next beat is the debate. This is where the protagonist hesitates, resists, or questions the journey. Like, should I be really doing this? So in Harry Potter, this is Harry's disbelief about magic and uncertainty about leaving the only life he's known. That's being reinforced by the Dursleys trying to stop him. Then there's break into Act 2. This is the moment of commitment. The protagonist chooses the new world. So in Harry Potter, this is when Harry boards the Hogwarts Express and leaves the Muggle world behind. This is the point of no return. Then there's the B story. This is a secondary storyline. It's often relational or emotional, and this supports the theme. In Harry Potter, this is Harry's friendships with Ron and Hermione, and his mentorship under figures like Hagrid and Dumbledore. The next beat, which is my favorite part, is fun and games. This is the promise of the premise. There's exploration, discovery, early wins, and mistakes. In Harry Potter, we can see this when we're being shown the classes, the spells, Hogwarts traditions, Quidditch, and discovering what it means to be a wizard. After this, there's the midpoint. This is a major turning point in the story. The stakes shift. There's often a false victory or false defeat. In Harry Potter, this is when Harry begins to understand the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone and his connection to Voldemort, realizing that there is a real danger. The next beat is bad guys close in. This is where the pressure increases and the external threats and internal doubts grow. In Harry Potter, this is when Harry, Ron, and Hermione discover that someone tried to break into Gringotts the same day that Hagrid removed the stone. And they also realize that the three-headed dog is guarding that stone at Hogwarts, and they suspect that Snape is trying to steal it. The next beat is All is Lost. This is the lowest point of the story. It feels like failure is inevitable. In Harry Potter, this is when Harry realizes that the stone is about to get stolen, that the adults are not going to be able to stop it in time, and if anything's going to be done, it's going to be up to him. The next beat is called The Dark Night of the Soul. This is the emotional aftermath, the reflection before the final push. So in Harry Potter, this is Harry accepting the risk and possibility of death, but choosing to act anyway. Then there's break into Act 3. So this is where a realization sparks the final plan. In Harry Potter, this is when Harry decides to go after the stone himself based on courage and loyalty rather than fear. Then there's the before last beat that's called the finale. So this is the climax of the story. The protagonist confronts the central conflict and proves that they have changed. So in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, this is where Harry faces Quirrell and Voldemort and protects the stone through his choices, not raw power. And then the final beat is called Final Image. And this is essentially a mirror of the opening image that shows transformation. So in Harry Potter, this is Harry returning to the Dursleys, no longer powerless, and he knows who he is and where he belongs. So those are all the beats that are included in the Save the Cat structure. Now I've made a free generic version of the Save the Cat beat sheet template with these same beats that you can download. I'm going to link that in the description below. You can just click it and download that for free. But if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, that structure usually isn't enough. So I'm also going to be linking to my paid fantasy and sci-fi beat sheet template. It uses the same 15 beats as the Save the Cat beats, so there's nothing proprietary or invented there. But it also adds descriptions of what each beat typically does in fantasy. It also has prompts to help you think through magic, stakes, and character decisions. There are also built-in pacing and word count formulas, so you can see how much space each section of the story should realistically take, and whether your middle is expanding beyond its structural role. And finally, there are also example beat sheets based on Throne of Glass, Lord of the Rings, and I think I'm also going to include Harry Potter in there too, so you can see how the beats actually play out in real stories. All right, that's all I have for today. If this helped you think about story structure more clearly, please give it a like. And if you want more practical fantasy craft videos, please subscribe to my channel. I also publish videos on world building, character development, and romantasy. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Happy writing!